Keanu Reeves stood near Gate 12, his dark cap pulled low over his eyes, hoping to slip through the airport unnoticed. He had grown used to blending into crowds, moving like a ghost through places where faces were too busy, too hurried to see a man who just wanted peace. But today, the world seemed slower. The air felt thick with memories, as if something from the past was about to come back, knocking on the door he had shut so many years ago. He shifted his bag from one shoulder to the other and checked the time again. His flight was delayed by another hour. He sighed, took a deep breath, and looked around for a place to sit. He found an empty bench near the big glass window that looked out onto the runway. Sitting there, he watched the planes land and take off, each one carrying stories, hopes, goodbyes, and reunions. He thought about his own story, the one he never spoke about, the chapters he kept hidden away from the world. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the airport lull him into a soft daydream. That was when he heard it, the small laughter of children. It was such a warm sound, echoing in the cold steel and glass of the airport. He opened his eyes and turned his head. There, just a few feet away, stood a man who looked tired yet proud, holding the hands of 3 little boys. The boys were playful, tugging at his arms, giggling, chasing each other in circles. Keanu's eyes widened. There was something strange in their faces, something familiar. The oldest boy's smile curved just like his did. The youngest had dark, deep eyes that reminded him of his own when he was a child. Keanu felt a chill run through him. He stared at the man. The man turned slightly, and their eyes met. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Keanu's mind struggled to place him. The man's hair was peppered with gray. His clothes simple, a bit worn, but his eyes, they told a story that made Keanu's heart clench. "Mr. Reeves?" The man's voice trembled as he spoke, as if he could not believe the image before him was real. The boys turned, curious, sensing something important in the air. Keanu stood up, his legs feeling weak for a moment. "Mark," he whispered, unsure if he had the name right. "Yeah, it's Mark," the man said, his eyes watering. "It's been, 15 years?" Keanu took a step closer, studying him. The janitor, his old building, the nights they would sit in the hallway, Keanu smoking his cigarettes after a long day of shooting, Mark mopping the floors, always with a gentle smile. They had shared quiet talks about life, about dreams they knew might never come true. Keanu reached out and hugged him before he could stop himself. The boys stared, wide-eyed, at the sight of their father hugging a stranger. But to Mark, Keanu was no stranger. He had been the one who gave him extra cash when he couldn't pay rent. He had been the one who told him, "You matter, Mark, you matter more than this mop and this empty hallway." "How have you been?" Keanu asked, pulling back. Mark gave him a shaky smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "I've been surviving," Mark said softly. He looked at his boys, then back at Keanu. "These are my boys, James, Liam, and the little one, Michael." The boys shyly stepped forward, looking at Keanu with innocent wonder. "They're beautiful," Keanu said, his voice gentle. But inside, his mind raced. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. He caught the oldest boy's eyes, and it was like looking into a mirror of his own youth. Mark cleared his throat, his eyes darting around as if he wanted to escape. "Listen, Keanu, it's really good to see you, but we should probably get going. We're catching a bus to visit my mother." His voice cracked at the end. The boys' clothes were clean, but worn thin. The youngest's shoes had holes. Keanu noticed every detail, the small things that spoke of hardship. "Mark, do you need help?" Keanu asked softly, but Mark shook his head quickly, his pride still standing tall despite everything. "You've done enough for me back then. You don't owe me anything." Keanu knelt down to meet the boys at eye level. "Hey, you guys excited to see your grandma?" he asked, his smile warm and kind. The oldest boy nodded. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice polite but curious. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Keanu paused, his chest tightening. "Yeah, I'm an old friend." He looked up at Mark, who seemed to be holding back tears. Something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them was ready to say aloud yet. The airport announcements crackled overhead. pulling them back into the present. Mark fumbled with the boys' small backpacks. "We should really go. Before the bus leaves, it was really good to see you, Keanu. I hope you're happy." Keanu stood frozen as he watched Mark lead the boys away, their tiny hands gripping his. Each step they took felt like pages of an unfinished book slipping through his fingers. He knew he couldn't just let them walk away. His instinct screamed that there was more to this. More that he needed to know, more that he needed to do. He grabbed his bag and started after them. Heart pounding. The questions he had buried for years clawed their way to the surface. Who were these boys? Why did they look like him? What secret was Mark carrying that he was too afraid to share? The answers lay ahead, and Keanu knew one thing for sure. He would not get on that plane until he found out the truth. Keanu Reeves moved through the busy airport, his heart racing like a drum in his chest. He kept his eyes fixed on Mark's back, watching him lead the three boys down a long hallway toward the bus terminal. The hum of rolling suitcases and soft airport announcements blurred into a low buzz in his ears. He could only think of the boy's eyes that looked too much like his own. He caught up just as Mark reached the terminal exit. Keanu called out softly, "Careful not to startle the kids, Mark. Wait, please." Mark turned, his shoulders tensing. The boys looked up, confused by the grown-up's strange energy. "Keanu, don't do this. You don't owe me anything," Mark said, his voice tight. But there was a crack in his armor now, something that showed he wasn't as strong as he pretended to be. Keanu stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. "This isn't about owing. This is about you, your boys, and the truth." He looked into Mark's eyes. They were tired, full of stories untold. "Tell me what's really going on, Mark. Don't push me away. Please." Mark glanced at his sons, then looked down at the floor. For a moment, the two men stood there in silence, just the distant sound of buses idling outside. Then Mark sighed, his shoulders slumping. "We don't have much time before the bus leaves," he muttered. "Come on." He led Keanu to a corner near the window where they could talk quietly. The boys sat on the floor with their small bags, drawing shapes on the glass with their fingers. Keanu knelt to offer them a candy bar he had in his pocket. The boys grinned and huddled together, munching happily, innocent to the storm brewing above their heads. Mark leaned against the wall, rubbing his forehead. "After you moved out of that old building, things got worse for me. The building changed owners. They fired me, couldn't find work for months. Then my wife." He paused, his voice breaking. "My wife got sick, real sick. I did everything I could, Keanu. She fought so hard. But we lost her." Keanu's heart sank. He had known Mark's wife, a gentle woman who'd sometimes bring him leftover soup when he'd come home late. "I'm so sorry, Mark," he said, his voice soft. "But the boys, they look like me. I can't ignore that." Mark's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He looked down at the boys and back at Keanu, his lips trembling. "When you were living in that building, do you remember there were nights my wife cleaned the upper floors with me? Sometimes you'd come home late. She'd always talk about how kind you were, how you treated us like people, not just staff." Keanu nodded, his memories playing back like old film reels, the laughter in the hall, the warm food they'd share sometimes. "Yes, I remember. One night, she was crying," Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She told me she had made a mistake, that one night you stayed to help her with some boxes. She said it just happened. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She loved me. She loved our family. But she said she could never forgive herself." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. The walls of the airport seemed to tilt for a second. Are you saying the boys are?" Mark nodded, his tears finally falling. "I don't know for sure. I never got a test. I couldn't bear it. I loved her too much. I loved them too much. They're my boys, Keanu. Mine. But when you look at them, it's like looking at you." Keanu felt the weight of it all pressing down on his shoulders. He looked at the boys again, the way the oldest held the youngest's hand, the same protective way he had once held his own sister's hand when they were kids. They deserved better than an old bus ride and empty pockets. "Mark, you shouldn't be doing this alone," Keanu said quietly. "Look at them. They deserve a chance." "I can help." Mark's face hardened, his pride flaring up again. "I don't want your charity, Keanu. You've always been kind, but this is my family. I'll figure it out." Keanu reached out, placing a gentle hand on Mark's shoulder. "This isn't charity. This is responsibility. If there's even the smallest chance they're mine too, I want to know them. I want to help you. I want them to have a better life. Please don't push me away." Mark looked at his boys, their faces pressed against the window, staring at the big buses lined up outside. He knew deep down that he couldn't keep doing this alone. His shoulders shook as he nodded. "What do you want to do?" "Come stay with me for a while," Keanu said. "Just for a little bit. We can get a test. I'll help you find work, help you get back on your feet. The boys can have warm beds, real food. They deserve that." Mark closed his eyes, the weight of years of struggle loosening just a little. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Keanu walked over to the boys, kneeling beside them. "Hey guys," he said with a smile. "How would you feel about coming to my place for a while? We can get you some good food, maybe watch a movie together." The boys looked up, their eyes bright and trusting. The oldest, James, nodded shyly. "Can we have popcorn?" he asked. Keanu laughed, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes, as much as you want, outside." The bus they were supposed to catch pulled away without them, but for the first time in years, Mark didn't feel like he was missing out on something. Instead, he felt like he was finally stepping into a future where hope wasn't just an empty word. Keanu picked up one of the boys, Mark held the other to close, and together they walked through the airport, a strange little family on a journey none of them could have ever imagined. Keanu Reeves sat in the back seat of the black SUV, the city lights flickering past the windows like fading stars. Beside him, the three boys were finally drifting off, their heads leaning on each other's shoulders, their tiny shoes still dusty from the bus terminal, their hands sticky from the chocolate bars Keanu had bought at the airport cafe. Every now and then, the oldest boy, James, opened his eyes just a little, as if to make sure Keanu was still there, that this dream wasn't going to vanish when he woke up. Mark sat in the passenger seat next to the driver, staring straight ahead, his hands twisting together in his lap. Every so often he looked back at the boys, and then at Keanu. The car's soft hum filled the silence between them, but there was a storm of questions waiting, swirling inside both men's minds. When they pulled up to Keanu's house, Mark stepped out first. He hesitated on the sidewalk, looking up at the tall iron gates and the soft lights glowing from the windows. He had never imagined he would stand here, not like this, not with so much shame and hope tangled up in his heart. Keanu got out carefully, trying not to wake the boys, but little Michael stirred and wrapped his arms around Keanu's neck. Keanu held him close, feeling the warmth of his tiny body, the softness of his breath. It struck him deep in the chest, a strange, quiet ache that he didn't quite understand yet. Inside the house, the boy's eyes widened at the sight of the big living room with its soft couches and the warm glow of the fireplace. They took off their shoes and tiptoed around, giggling as they peeked into every corner. Keanu watched them, his heart heavy but full at the same time. For years, his home had been too big, too empty, just walls and silence. Tonight, it felt different. It felt like life was breathing into the empty spaces again. Mark sat on the edge of a chair near the window, his hands shaking as he held a cup of tea Keanu had made for him. His eyes were red, the weight of the day pressing down on him. "I can't believe we're here," he murmured. "I don't know what you're getting yourself into, Keanu." Keanu sat across from him, his voice calm and steady. "I know exactly what I'm getting into, Mark. If there's any chance they're my boys, I want to be here. I want to know them, and I want to help you." Mark's eyes brimmed with tears again. "They're good kids, you know. They don't complain. They don't ask for much. Sometimes they go to bed hungry, but they never blame me. I see her in them every day, my wife. And now I see you, too." Keanu leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "We'll get a test done. We'll find out for sure. But no matter what, you're not alone anymore." They sat there in the quiet glow of the room, two men bound by a secret neither of them had chosen. In the hallway, the boys were curled up on the big couch under a warm blanket. the TV flickering with an old cartoon they were too tired to keep watching. Keanu got up, tucked the blanket around them, and sat on the floor beside them, just watching them breathe. Later that night, after the boys were fast asleep in the guest room, 3 tiny bodies tangled up together on one big bed, Keanu stood by the door, listening to their soft snores. Mark came up behind him, his voice low and rough. "They're gonna ask questions, you know, about you, about why you care." Keanu nodded, not taking his eyes off the boys. "I'll tell them the truth, that their dad is a good man, that I made mistakes I didn't even know I made, that family isn't just blood. It's showing up when it matters." Mark leaned against the wall, exhausted. "You really think they're yours?" Keanu let out a shaky breath. "I don't know, but looking at them, it feels like looking at something I lost a long time ago." They stood there for a long time, 2 shadows in a hallway lit by a single lamp. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside, something had come to a pause. A moment frozen in time where 2 men tried to find forgiveness, understanding, and maybe a new beginning. In the morning, Keanu woke to the sound of footsteps running down the hallway. The boys burst into his room, their hair messy, eyes bright. James climbed onto the bed first, followed by Liam and Michael. They bounced around, laughing, as if they had been there forever. "Can we have pancakes?" Liam asked, his eyes wide with hope. Keanu laughed, ruffling his hair. "Of course, pancakes." "It is." Mark watched from the doorway, his lips curling into a tired but genuine smile. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at something better. As Keanu flipped pancakes in the kitchen, he caught sight of the boys sitting at the counter, legs swinging, faces full of wonder. He knew the road ahead would be messy. There would be questions, anger, maybe even pain when the truth came out. But as he poured syrup over 3 little plates, he felt a strange sense of peace. Sometimes family shows up in the most unexpected places, like an airport gate where the past runs right into you, holding 3 boys who might just be the pieces of your heart you never knew were missing. Keanu Reeves stood by the kitchen window, watching the early morning sunlight spill across his backyard. The 3 boys were outside, running barefoot on the grass still wet with dew. They chased each other in circles, their laughter filling the spaces that once echoed with silence. Keanu leaned his elbows on the counter, a mug of coffee warming. His hands, he felt something inside him he hadn't felt in years, a reason to stay, to wake up, to care about something bigger than himself. Behind him, Mark sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. He looked older in the soft light, the years of struggle carved into the lines around his eyes. He watched the boys too, a hint of fear hidden deep in his tired expression. He turned to Keanu, his voice low and uncertain. "What if they hate me for this, for keeping this from them?" Keanu shook his head. "They won't hate you. You did what you thought was right. You kept them safe. You kept your family together. You did more than most would." Mark looked down, his thumb tracing the rim of his cup. "And if they're yours, what then? They'll want to know why you weren't there." Keanu's eyes softened. He had asked himself that same question over and over these past few days, turning it inside his head like a stone he couldn't put down. "Then I'll tell them the truth, that I didn't know, that I would have been there if I did, and that I'm here now. I won't run." The kitchen fell silent, the only sound the boys' happy shouts outside. Mark let out a shaky breath. "You really want to get the test done?" "Yes," Keanu said firmly. "We owe them that. They deserve to know where they come from. But no matter what it says, I'm here. I won't walk away." Mark nodded, though he still looked afraid. "They've never had much, Keanu. I don't want them to think they're charity." Keanu's voice was gentle but strong. "They're not. They're family." When the boys came back inside, their feet muddy and their hair sticking up in every direction, Keanu helped them wash up. He found himself laughing as Michael splashed soapy water everywhere, giggling like it was the best game in the world. James sat quietly on the counter, studying Keanu's face with wide, thoughtful eyes. "Are you my dad?" James asked suddenly, his small voice cutting through the moment like a sharp knife. The bathroom fell quiet. Mark froze in the doorway. Keanu felt his heart twist. He set down the towel and knelt in front of James, so they were eye to eye. "That's a good question," Keanu said softly. "We don't know for sure yet, but we're going to find out. Does that scare you?" James shook his head slowly. "No, I like you. You're nice. You make pancakes." Keanu let out a laugh, hugging him gently. "Well, that's something, huh?" He looked up at Mark, who stood there, his eyes wet. They both knew the boys were smart, that they felt things deeply even if they didn't always have the words for it. That afternoon, Keanu made the call to a private clinic. They scheduled the test for the next day. When he hung up, he looked at Mark, who sat hunched on the couch, his hands covering his face. "It's gonna be okay," Keanu said. No matter what, Mark didn't answer, but he nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The boys played on the floor, their laughter bouncing off the walls. They were too young to understand how the truth could change everything. That night, after the boys were tucked into bed, Keanu stepped outside onto the porch. The city lights glowed in the distance, but here it was quiet. He thought about the years he had spent alone, the people he had lost, the family he had never had a chance to build. He felt Mark's presence behind him. "Can I ask you something?" Mark said, his voice rough. "Anything," Keanu replied. "Why are you doing this? Really, you could just let us go." Keanu turned to him, his face calm under the soft porch light. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I did. Because I know what it's like to lose people. Because maybe this is my chance to get something right." Mark looked at him for a long time, then nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "We get through this together." Inside the house, 3 small boys dreamed their innocent dreams, unaware of the truth that waited just around the corner. Outside, 2 men stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever came next, a future built on forgiveness, on truth, and on a kind of family neither of them had ever expected to find. The morning of the DNA test felt colder than usual, though the sun shone bright in the sky above Keanu's house. Inside, the air was thick with a silence none of them could break. The boys ate their breakfast at the kitchen island, bowls of cereal and fresh fruit, but even their laughter seemed softer today, like they knew something big was about to happen, even if they couldn't name it. Mark sat hunched over his cup of coffee, his eyes staring at nothing. He looked so much older than he had just days ago at the airport. Keanu stood at the counter, wiping his hands on a dish towel, trying to think of the right thing to say. But there were no words that could make this simple. "Are you ready?" Keanu asked quietly. Mark looked up, his eyes heavy but resolute. "Doesn't matter if I'm ready, does it?" Keanu nodded, a sad smile pulling at the corner of his lips. He glanced at the boys, who were now playing with toy cars on the floor. James, the oldest, looked up and met Keanu's eyes. "Are we going to the doctor?" he asked, his voice clear, direct. Keanu knelt next to him. "Yes, buddy, just to answer some important questions. But you're safe, okay? Nothing will hurt." James nodded and put a tiny hand on Keanu's knee. "Okay." Double quotes. At the clinic, the bright white walls felt too clean, too cold. The boys sat side by side on a small bench, their little legs swinging, shoes not quite touching the floor. They squeezed each other's hands when the nurse came with the swabs. It was quick, just a swipe inside the mouth. But the tension in the room was heavy enough to make Mark rub his eyes again and again, as if he could wipe away the weight pressing on him. Keanu stayed close, his hand resting on Mark's shoulder, the other brushing over James's hair. He didn't flinch when the nurse asked him to take the test tube. He just opened his mouth, letting them do what they needed to do. He needed answers as much as Mark did, maybe more. "How long does it take?" Mark asked, his voice cracking. "A few days," the nurse said softly, as if she knew their story without hearing a word. "You'll get a call." They left the clinic together, the boys skipping ahead, their toy cars clutched tightly in their fists. Keanu and Mark walked behind them, to fathers, maybe, with the same fears and the same small, fragile hope. That night, the boys fell asleep curled together on the couch while Keanu and Mark sat at the dining table, the city lights flickering through the windows behind them. Keanu poured 2 cups of tea, the steam rising between them like a thin veil. I keep thinking, Mark began, staring into his cup, about how we used to sit in that hallway all those years ago. You, sitting on that old step with your cigarettes. Me, mopping floors, dreaming about a better life. Keanu smiled sadly. We were just a tired men trying to make sense of the world. Mark's hands trembled as he set down the cup. I loved her, you know, even after what happened. I forgave her. But sometimes at night, I wondered if it was me who wasn't enough. Keanu reached across the table, resting his hand on Mark's. Don't ever say that. You gave them everything. You gave her love when she was scared and alone. You gave these boys a father who never left, even when it was hard. Mark's eyes glistened. And now you're here. What if they are yours? What then? They'll want to know you. They'll want you. Keanu looked at the sleeping boys, their faces so peaceful, so innocent. Then I'll be here. But I'll never take them away from you, Mark. You're their father, blood or not. What if they hate me? Mark whispered. Keanu shook his head firmly. They won't. They'll know the truth. They'll know love. The next day, life tried to pretend it was normal. Keanu took the boys to the park, pushing them on swings while Mark sat on a bench, staring at his trembling hands. People stopped to take photos with Keanu, but he was gentle, careful to keep the boys close, to make sure they knew they were safe with him, even when strangers crowded in. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, Keanu sat with the boys on the porch steps. Michael curled up in his lap, half asleep, while James leaned against his shoulder. Are you my dad? James asked again, his voice softer this time, almost like he was asking for permission to believe it. Keanu swallowed the lump in his throat. I don't know yet, buddy, but I love you. All three of you. You know that, right? James nodded, his little face pressed into Keanu's arm. Okay, can we stay here forever? Keanu looked up at Mark, who stood in the doorway listening. His eyes were tired, but softer now, like he'd let go of something that had been choking him for years. Keanu kissed the top of James's head. As long as you want, buddy. As long as you want. In that moment, the fear of the test results still lingered like a shadow behind them. But for now, they were a family, imperfect, unexpected, but real in every way that mattered. 3 days later, the sun rose on a morning that felt heavier than any before. Keanu Reeves stood by the window of his living room, staring out at the city waking up. The boys' laughter floated from the kitchen, where Mark was making scrambled eggs. The sound should have calmed him, but instead, it made his heart pound harder. He had been through a lifetime of storms, but nothing felt quite like this. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, one sharp vibration. He knew what it meant. He picked it up, his thumb trembling just slightly as he read the clinic's message. Results are ready. Call us. Keanu looked over his shoulder, seeing the three boys perched on the stools, swinging their legs as they waited for breakfast. Michael caught his eye and waved with a sticky hand. Keanu managed a soft smile. He took a deep breath, stepped into the hallway, and dialed the number. It felt like hours before the nurse came on the line. Her voice was kind, careful, as if she knew her words could crack open an entire world. Mr. Reeves, the results are in. The test shows a probability of 99.9% that you are the biological father of James, Liam, and Michael. Keanu's heart stopped, then thundered so hard in his chest he thought it might break his ribs. He pressed his palm to the wall, steadying himself. Thank you, he whispered. His mind was spinning. 3 boys, 3 pieces of his soul he'd never known he'd left behind in a dark hallway all those years ago. He ended the call and stood there, his hands still pressed to the wall, trying to gather himself. He thought of his mother, his own childhood, the loneliness that had followed him for so long. He thought of how life had brought him back to this moment, not as punishment, but maybe as a chance to make things right. He walked back into the kitchen. Mark saw him first. One look into Keanu's eyes and he knew. The spatula slipped from Mark's hand onto the stove. He grabbed the edge of the counter, his breath catching in his throat. It's true, isn't it? Mark's voice cracked. They're yours? Keanu nodded, his own eyes wet. He turned to the boys, who were staring at him now, sensing the change in the air. James, Liam, Michael, can you come here? Keanu said, His voice gentle. The boys climbed down from their stools, feet pattering across the tile floor. They stopped in front of him, three little faces upturned, searching his eyes. "Remember how you asked if I was your dad?" Keanu said, kneeling so he could be at their level. "Well, I am. I'm your dad." The boys looked at each other. James's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and wonder. Liam stepped forward first, wrapping his small arms around Keanu's neck. Michael pressed his cheek against Keanu's shoulder, holding on like he would never let go. Even James, who always tried to be brave for his brothers, broke into a grin that melted Keanu's heart. Mark turned away, his shoulders shaking. Keanu looked at him over the boys' heads. "Mark, you're their dad too. That doesn't change." Mark wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know who I am now." Keanu stood, still holding Michael in one arm. He stepped to Mark, putting his free hand on his shoulder. "You're the man who raised them, who gave up everything for them. You'll always be their father. We're not taking anything away. We're just adding more love." Double quotes Mark let out, a sound between a laugh and a sob. He hugged Keanu. The boys squeezed tight between them. For a moment, there were no words, just the warmth of four hearts that had been lost and now found each other again. That night, they sat together on the living room floor, blankets and pillows piled around them like a fort. They watched an old movie, the boys falling asleep one by one in their father's arms. Keanu looked at Mark, and Mark looked at him, both men holding pieces of the past and the future. "You ever think," Mark said quietly, "about how it all started? To guys in a hallway, mopping floors, smoking cigarettes." Keanu smiled, his voice soft as he stroked Liam's hair. "Yeah, and now look at us. Life's funny." Mark nodded. "Life's kind." Keanu looked down at his boys. Their boys, tangled together, breathing softly, finally safe. He knew there would be hard days ahead. Questions, therapy, maybe even anger when the boys were old enough to understand the whole truth. But he also knew that this time, he wouldn't run. They'd face it together. A family built on mistakes and forgiveness, secrets and second chances. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars, but inside that house, the brightest lights were these three little boys. Proof that sometimes life gives you back what you thought you'd lost forever.